She said and made me promise a bunch of things that felt very serious but also very confusing, and then we hung up. People who were mentioned in someone's suicide note, what's your story? He sent me a separate note the day before he did it. Thanks for existing, I love you. I just answered with love you too, bud. I had no idea. My partner took her own life last year. I had become a carer due to her poor and declining health, and she was despondent, going from a life as an active working professional to being stuck at home with her mind and body letting her down. Her note was addressed to me and me alone. She texted her father. In many ways, it was beautifully worded. She expressed her eternal love for me and recognition of mine for her, which gave me comfort that she did not die feeling unloved. She stated that she, and I, had done our best and fought so hard for so long, but she couldn't go on. Thank you for everything you did, there is nothing more you could have done. She said lovely things about me and ended with love for eternity, which I hang on to on my dark days as belief that we will meet again and her spirit lives on. I know I couldn't do more. But she was only 38 and fought so hard for years as her body failed from combined autoimmune illnesses. Nothing that would kill her itself, even crueler in a way, it just robbed her of life bit by bit. Beautiful. Please accept my condolences. I am writing for the opposite reason. It's in question whether my son intended to drive into a tree and kill himself or if it were an accident. I know for certain he did not intend the accident. Why? Because I know, he would have left me a note. You were given a beautiful gift. A gift that comes with some closure. In a way most can't understand, I love you. My sister-in-law had some failing organs from autoimmune disease. She needed a heart and double lung transplant. The same as your partner, she was an incredibly outgoing, self-reliant, strong woman with everything going for her. She suffered and fought on for 2 years, but her quality of life declined so much she couldn't really do much for herself anymore. After she spent a lovely day with my wife, she stopped taking her medication and had a massive heart attack. It really killed my wife, but she went out on her own terms when she was ready. I hope if I'm ever terminally ill, I hope I have the guts to do the same thing if it gets so bad I can't look after myself with no real hope of recovery at the end of it. He wanted me to know he loved me. That it wasn't my fault. That I was the best friend anyone could want or have. That I should have his car. That he thought he was going mad and was saving his brother and me from the madness. I showed the note to my therapist. She thinks he had schizophrenia. His mom did. It's been 6 years. I'm still not over his death. Doubt I ever will be. When my mom attempted suicide, I was in her note. She just wanted me to know that it wasn't my fault and that she loves me no matter what. My mom committed suicide after finding out that her tumor was malignant. She had just lost her father a year before and her mother died in treatment for cancer. She laid everything out, notes to specific people and how she wanted things done. I have always been an old soul and she planned for me to find her as I would be the reasonable person I am. But that day I was invited to try out for the debate team, so I came home late, and my little sister was the one who found her. I had lived with Craig for about 8 months before he killed himself. I'd known him for 4 years before that. We met at a metal gig and he was a short, thin guy who almost got trampled in a mosh pit. We knew he was going a bad way as soon as he started hanging out with the group we all knew did heroin and similar regularly, maybe 2 months after we started living together. I tried to help him as much as I could. There were so many nights when he got back, clearly out of his mind on whatever it was he'd been doing, and he'd stay on the couch in my room instead of going to his own. He didn't like to be alone. I spent a lot of mornings cooking for him and generally making sure he was okay, but it was like shoveling snow in a blizzard. He'd just go do the same the next night. At the end of that 8 months, we found him in his room having overdosed. We realized it was intentional when we read his note. A lot of it was about his family problems, his mental health, and just generally how terrible he thought the world was. Then near the end was a little paragraph about me, thanking me but saying I made the decision to end his life more complicated. He asked me not to blame myself. He then rambled some more and it was clear he'd been high whilst writing it. I moved out a month later. He just got back from Iraq, Marine. He called me up. I wasn't very close to him but we both served. Michael. We talked for about 2 weeks before it happened. He talked about how much he loved his mom, his brothers in the service. I thought everything was normal, that shit we all talk about after coming home. He shot himself over the phone. I still can't get the sound out of my head. Navy took 2 weeks to send a chaplain. Then NCIS was involved. When I returned home I found out that he had left a ruck for me. He left a rucksack for me and I couldn't do anything for him. He gave it to his parents and had asked them to give it to me. A good friend of mine killed herself after her son died. She had always wanted nothing more in the world than to be a mother, and when her son was born we were all very happy for her. 2 years later, he was diagnosed with a rare genetic illness that was some kind of muscular dystrophy. It was a very slow, very painful process and there was nothing she could do, only watch as her son slowly lost his just newfound ability to crawl, talk and eat. After a year he was connected to all kinds of hoses keeping him alive. She had to feed him through a tube, his breathing through an oxygen hose was weak, and he looked miserable. After 2 more years at the age of 4, he died. We attended his funeral, we talked to her and through all this, she seemed so strong. She never let anyone see her weakness. But on the funeral day, she broke down and cried and told us what hell she had been going through. She knew there was nothing she could have done to prevent this, that she wanted to be strong for her son even though he couldn't open his eyes for the last months and how she sometimes wished for it to be over sooner, so he wouldn't suffer so long. One of her other friends said that it will get better, slowly but eventually because she didn't know what to say. None of us knew, except those set phrases. A week later she had killed herself, but not before writing a personal note to each and every one of her friends and her family, explaining how she could never get over the death of her child and that we shouldn't be sad because she didn't end her life because she was sorrowful but hopeful to see him again. We try to meet every year on her death day in a pub we used to drink. It's been 6 years since then. My girlfriend killed herself a little over a year ago. We were fighting and I was planning to leave her. She sent me a message that she hoped her death weighed heavily on me for a long time while I was sleeping. She was dead in the bed next to me when I woke up. When my stepdad and the father of my 3 younger brothers killed himself last month, he didn't leave a note. What he did do, I didn't even know that was possible, was queue up 3 texts, so they wouldn't be received until the morning after. At exactly 8 a.m., all 3 of my brothers received a text from him. To my 2 oldest brothers, 19 and 17, I love you forever. I'm sorry, I just can't live with this any longer. To my youngest brother, 13, you are a very special boy and I'll love you forever. I asked my youngest brother if it had made it better or worse. He said worse. It was my dad's note. Telling us boys that he is so proud of the men we've become and even just writing that now makes me cry happy and sad tears. It's been just over 4 years now. He was a great dad and had such a profoundly positive impact on who I am today. Even with how it ended, I couldn't ask for a better dad. He was something else. I'm a lucky kid. Wish he could see me now. I'm glad he knew my wife before he went. Wish he could meet my nephew. I love you, Dad. I still miss the hell out of you, you ornery old hippie. You're still my hero. Thank you. For everything. Valp wasn't expecting that wave. Thank you. It's been a minute since I cried for him. No note, just a phone call to preteen me that had stayed up too late because my single-parent mother had gone out looking to score whatever pills would sate her addiction. Kid me had no idea, adult me now knows it was obvious. I don't remember the call completely, but I do remember being annoyed she'd kicked me off the dial-up by calling in. She said and made me promise a bunch of things that felt very serious but also very confusing and then we hung up. Police officer knocked on the door a few hours later and everything changed. No one but me knows about that phone call, especially not my brother. I'll be the exact same age she was, down to the hour, in roughly 500 days. I keep a countdown timer on my phone. One of the promises she made me make was to live longer than she did. Used to know this woman, whose ex-husband killed himself and used his suicide note to tell his children, 6 and 8 that their mummy killed him and not only was it her fault but theirs too. And the police dealing with it had to be physically stopped by the mother from reading it to her damn kids. One of the more fucked up stories from where I live. Not really a suicide one but an end old life goodbye one. He was sick and almost got through it, but at the end with a weak immune system, the cold was enough to get information on everything. He was almost 18. Till this day the perfect person for me. And most important of all, the only real rock I had who was there from the moment we first met. He wanted to make me laugh. He always did that. Made a few jokes. Terrible ones, dad ones. It still made me laugh, and made the pain more durable. I miss those lame jokes. My mom called me to tell me that I contributed to her death before she killed herself. I imagine having her tell me it wasn't my fault would have helped. My birth mom killed herself and I know she wrote my name down on a letter. My birth family never let me see it, but I have speculated for many years. I think she felt bad for putting me up for adoption at a young age. The adopted family that took me in didn't really want me, so they sent me to a bunch of boarding schools during my childhood. I was sexually abused at those schools, so I think my birth mom somehow thought it was her fault. Funnily enough, I remember blaming myself for her death after it happened. It took me years to get over, but I'm doing much better. I still miss her. I was thanked in my friend's suicide note. I was with him the night he passed. I didn't know he was going to do it, he just said he was upset and wanted to meet up for a smoke and a chat. I believe I was the last person to see him alive. It really hit me hard when I found out he had passed. Around May 2 years ago, my mother tried to commit suicide and I remember finding the note after I found her. When I went to find her, I thought she was somebody trying to break into our house, so I went and grabbed a knife. It turns out the noise I heard was her body flopping against the door. I ended up being able to make sure she was okay, but I think what killed me most was her note. She stated that my 2 sisters and I were all she had, and, since we were growing up, she didn't have us anymore. She wanted to leave this world so badly. My boyfriend killed himself when I was 18, he was 19, and I waited 7 years, January of this year, to read his whole note. When he first passed away, I took care of his elderly parents for months following because he was an only child and they could barely function, let alone plan a huge funeral. It was horrible. It took every ounce of strength that I had to get through that time and care for them on top of it. I found the note underneath a bowl, pipe, that I had lent my boyfriend, which he had hidden in a false bottom compartment thing in the center console of his car. I read the first few lines and then immediately hid the note in my favorite book. I couldn't bring myself to muster the courage to read it completely at that time, but what I had read had been enough to absolutely shatter his parents and I didn't have the heart to give it to them. I kept it for years and with each year that passed, I held on to more and more guilt. I completely spiraled downwards after the funeral, drinking heavily, putting myself in danger, and avoiding the world. I moved halfway across the country, maybe to start fresh or maybe to run away, I don't know. I kept the unread note, it weighed heavily on my bookshelf for years. I almost read it many times, usually when I was drunk or suicidal myself, but I was always too afraid to find out that my fears were true, that there was something that I could have done or something that I had done to cause him to do such a horrible thing. His parents are actually doing well now. They're selling the house finally, they got a dog, and are more actively involved with family and friends. I love seeing them allowing themselves to be happy when I know that they are still filled with terrible grief. I'm not sure if I did the right thing by keeping the note, but after reading it I'm certain that they wouldn't be the people that they are today if they had read what their son wrote about his life and about them when he was at the lowest point imaginable. One of my best friend's mother committed suicide and had a little message for her 2 children in her suicide note. It was mostly straight down the line apologetic, and an explanation as to why. Spinal cancer metastasized and it was only downhill for her. She did her taxes, paid all her bills, got all her paperwork in order. I wrote a farewell note and swallowed a bottle of painkillers. I only managed to see a small section of the note as I was the second non-emergency person on the scene. My friend was the first, but enough to know it was her way of trying to make things as painless as possible for everyone else. Even though nobody was mentioned, this specific note stays close to my heart to this day. My dad is a retired detective, and one day a few years ago he came home from work visually distraught. I usually talk to him about his day, so I asked him what was wrong and he told me a young man, I think around 22, had committed suicide and the note broke his heart. I asked what it said and it read something like, "Mom, Dad, I'm sorry I couldn't be stronger. I hope to see you both someday in a place that's beautiful." 7 months ago my girlfriend committed suicide because her father was abusive and her friends were all against her because she started dating me. I believe one of her friends had a crush on me. A week later I got a text from her with the suicide note and it read, "Dear little pariah 47, I just want you to know that you were the kindest person I ever met and I love you for that. However, I can't take it anymore and I know you will find someone after I'm gone, so as you're reading this I've already taken my life. Thank you for helping me the best you could have and thank you for being my boyfriend." After I read the text I immediately rushed over to her house, which was about 20 minutes away, and I arrived the police already there and my heart sank and felt tears overflowing out my eyes. I entered a state of deep depression and almost attempted suicide as well. I started drinking and cutting myself, and after about 2 weeks I stopped going to school and blocked myself off from my friends and family. I wouldn't answer their texts and calls, and eventually, they finally had enough and assigned me a therapist, and I'm still trying to get over it, but I'm getting better. My best friend killed himself when we were 16. It definitely has been the hardest thing I've ever had to go through in my entire life. I've questioned reality since that day, and I think part of my questions comes from the fact that he didn't leave a note. There was no final goodbye. I'm not sure if a note would have helped bring everyone closure, but writing no note, I just know he was in such a dark place and didn't want to burden anyone. It was all because of a girl, and I'm near positive if he would have been able to survive 6 months post-breakup he would have been fine. That's what is so scary about deep depression, that you can't see any light at the end of the tunnel. Your mind is consumed with your emotions and you feel no hope. He made a permanent decision to a temporary problem, and although his pain is gone, everyone who loved him is still in pain. I feel so bad for his dad who found him. My stepdad committed suicide when I was about 7 years old. In his letter, he wrote he was lonely since my mother left him. He mentioned that he couldn't live anymore because I didn't want to see him anymore and didn't want to talk to him on the phone when he called my mother the last time. I found him hanging on my grandmother's attic where I played hide and seek with my cousin. At this time he was 3 weeks dead. It's difficult to think about it. Even though I know I was just a child and I had my reasons, he was an alcoholic who beat my mother in front of me every time he drank. I still feel guilty. And for that feeling I hate him. On the other hand, I know he was a wreck, destroyed by his parents. But neither my mother nor I were responsible for this. There was a girl who was suffering really hard from some emotional problems, culture shock, depression among other things. She took to a Facebook group and began looking for support for things that were not about her or in her control. She broke this Facebook group's rules about doing someone who was already in jail and could not, and never did, hurt her, posting about the place he worked, his home address, his full name, etc. I was one of the people who told her that doing him was unnecessary because he was already in jail, was not leaving soon, and that it was against the group's rules. The post got removed. A few months later she killed herself and cited the group taking down her post as one of the reasons why she did it. Honestly, I'm very sad that she did that. I don't feel like I did anything wrong though. Would I have not reported the post if I knew that it would mean I wasn't implicated? Sure. But I know realistically that she would still have had a list and gone through with it eventually. She was not okay. A friend's younger sister got a massive crush on me. I would text me all the time and get mad if I didn't reply immediately. I tried to never lead her on and did my best to let her down easy, but I was young and dumb and didn't know how to deal with it. So the thing continued. By the time I finally worked up the courage to say that this was unhealthy and that we needed to stop, it was already like 3 months. The next day my mom told me she tried to kill herself. She told me about the note. She tried to protect me, but it wasn't too hard to figure out what the note said, or confirm it. She wrote she was killing herself because I didn't love her back. 16 Yomi did not know how to handle that, and honestly messed me up a bit for a while. My mom told me the best thing I could do was give her space, not talk to her and tell her if the girl texted me again. The girl recovered and attempted to reach out to me a few more times after that, but I didn't respond. It's been 6 years now and I wonder all the time if she is okay. I hope so. Thank you for watching Reddit Space. Please subscribe if you love these Reddit stories.